the stupidest thing I ever did in my life, I think, which was swallowing 10 doses of LSD. And not surprisingly, I landed into a kind of a psychotic crisis and in psychiatry. So the problem with fear is that it immobilizes us. It takes away our agency.
Yes.
And we get stuck in a kind of thinking like, oh, look at all these threats coming at us.
So today I'm talking to Bart Weetjens. Bart, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for asking me, Tobias. Pleasure to be here.
It's really a pleasure for me to talk to you because you're a very fascinating person, what you did with your life. And there's quite some overlaps with what interests me. So I'm curious about this conversation. But also from the little interaction we had so far, I really appreciate you as a person and your, the energy you bring to the world. So it's just also a joy to meeting you and having this conversation, really. And I've grouped the questions that I want to go through with you in 3 parts, and then we can still see where it takes us from there. But roughly, I would like to discuss a little bit your life because you have such an interesting sequence of different things you did in your life. Training rats to find landmines and cleaning landmines, saving millions of people's lives potentially. But then you're also a Zen master, teaching others, guiding others in Zen and Buddhist practice. And so, yeah, I am a practitioner myself on a similar path, and I have so many questions about that and how, like, why you changed. There's one question, but also how this path or this practice can help us in today's times with our big crisis. And the third part is about, how to deal with all these crises that we're having these days, and also on the personal level, like overwhelm of fear, uncertainty, how to deal with all of that. And I think we can get some good insights from you with your own experience as a Zen master and also over the years. So as I mentioned, I think we should start with your life because it's just so fascinating. And maybe shortly, you can describe this pivotal moment in your youth. Because before you trained rats and became a social entrepreneur and all these things, you had quite a difficult time in your youth where you were into drugs and struggling about how to go about your life or find meaning, as I understand it. And then you had this moment where you took an overdose, actually, and then you were in a mental difficult situation and treatment for several weeks, and that kind of sparked or led to you later on being a social entrepreneur. And maybe you can describe a bit that moment in your life that, becoming a mental sick person by accident sounds really horrible. So how that was for you and how that has changed you.
Yeah, it was a horrible experience. I honestly thought that I was mad. And, I went through a kind of a psychotic state, and I landed indeed in psychiatry. And I didn't have any perspective at all at that time. Just to put things in perspective, I had never had the intention to suicide or anything. I was just a punk kicking against every establishment, a bit of a rebel, and I'll explain you where this came from. But in the during my studies, where I was kind of kept very short, and there was lots of abuse in my early childhood. Abuse and ignorance, like being neglect. I should say ignorance. I think neglect is the right word here. I was in the same time kept very in a very framed. There was not a lot of space for joy, creativity, um, and when I g- graduated from secondary education and entered into the Academy of Arts, studying product design, I came in a very bohemian environment, and the thing was that I hadn't learned healthy boundaries. So I kind of started experimenting with drugs that was kind of forbidden, and uh, and I went way too far in that, simply because I hadn't learned about healthy boundaries. And yeah, for a year or three, the first 3 years actually of university, I was kind of a party animal. Broke completely free from all these limitations that were there in my early childhood. And in this total freedom, we can talk about that later, because what is total freedom? When there are no boundaries, you could argue there is no freedom. Yeah. So in this boundless freedom, I would say it became a total chaos. Well, I still had good results in school, but I was going out every night. And yeah, what I didn't notice was that my body was depleting. And when at some point in Spain with friends, after several weeks of holiday party, um, I did the stupidest thing I ever did in my life, I think, which was yeah, swallowing 10 doses of LSD. Actually, what was remaining, yeah, and not surprisingly, I landed into a kind of a psychotic crisis, and in psychiatry. It was very difficult for me because yeah, there was not a single perspective at that time. Even if everybody told me this will heal and you will come through this, it was yeah, a very lonely time and kind of desperate. Um, Also, interestingly, in my psychosis, I kind of declared that I was a Zen monk. Well, I hadn't even heard about Zen. So this kind of interesting. And yeah, uh, much later, well, not that much later, actually, shortly after coming out of psychiatry, I actually encountered this practice of Zen, and it became for me well, a very rejuvenating, in the first place, therapeutic approach, and later on it became like the center point of my life, and from where I act in society.
Mm. And did you? mm, It's interesting to me because when you're in such a state, it must be so frustrating to that something in you has changed. Your mind or your consciousness is not the same as before. There's I don't know. I've never been in such state, but I assume everything is so unknown and strange that you really freak out in a way. But as it seems, because you then encountered Zen and so forth, so you didn't lose faith, so to say, in the basic qualities of your mind. Like there could also be a tendency to, okay, now I'm kind of healed. Now let's run away to the normal world and get engaged in just the outer world and deal as little as possible with this mind and all these states. Um, but there was some trust in the human mind and the good
Uh,
qualities of it.
sure, and sure, there was definitely trust, but there was also a lot of suffering, and not in the least physical suffering. I obviously needed to take medication in that time, and well, my was swollen. Um, I had, I really didn't feel at ease anymore in my body. My possibilities and my capabilities were heavily reduced, where I had broken kind of free of the environment I came from. I needed to return to my parents' place, also to come free from that community where there was so much drug use. And yeah, there were lots of challenges actually. With regards of trust, um, trust is a very beautiful subject. Huh? I think life itself is so amazing, so regenerative. Um, and I think it's especially that, the trust in other people that surrounded me, therapists, caretakers, the psychiatrists, psychologists, my girlfriend at that time. There was so much love and care that helped me to gain trust in my own capabilities again.
Mm.
And gradually, I was able, in consent with psychiatrists, and to reduce that medication. It was kind of over years. It took me 10 years actually to become completely free from that medication. But I learned the mechanisms in me that was triggering stress, that kind of changed the balance in, because you can say from a neurochemical point of view, these are neurotransmitters that are out of balance. And I learned to recognize those signs earlier and earlier, and then slightly correct with an ever reducing dose of neuroleptics. And until 10 years later, it was the moment I moved to Africa with the Apopo project. I actually didn't need any medication anymore. I still kept it for years, like in case.
Yeah.
Um, but I became more and more stress resilient over those years. Yeah.
Yeah. That is so interesting how you became from such a person who just went to all these difficulties and just recovered from that. One could say that, well, if he can manage more or less a stable, normal life in Europe, that will already be a lot. But then from there, you went on to become this social entrepreneur. You moved to Africa. You lived in Tanzania for 15 years. You built up this organization that still exists and cleared landmines in so many countries. And you gave this TED talk in I think 2001. So that must be 10 or 15 years after that accident. But even within 10 or 15 years in between, becoming from such a person who just suffered this incident, and then becoming a social entrepreneur with all these innovation, inspiration, inspiring others, must also be very stressful, jetting from between Europe and Africa, and having a large team, having to handle funding issues. So it's like, I don't know if I would be able to handle that. And this development that you were able to do these things afterwards is just impressive. So I don't know. Maybe you can tell a bit about how this came about. This whole idea about of training rats and to with their sense to find landmines and help clear landmines, and how this experience was for you, from becoming just busy with your own life and then being the leader of such a big organization and winning all these prizes and so forth.
Yeah, I think mentoring played a big role in that. In particular, three people who have been an incredible resource to me. One is my Zen master, my Zen teacher. The other is the director of the design school where I studied. And the third one is Franz, the Christian priest who had been seeing both my parents, and he was doing therapy with them later on, but also with me. And I'm actually very grateful to these three people who have had key pivotal roles in my life. Also, coming back to trust, is to the extent I was able to trust them, distrust translated in, um, yeah, real support. Um, yeah, because like to answer your question, like how you got there from one to the other. Um, well, first of all, I think I was gifted with a functional mind. I had good scores in university, and it was mainly that there were so many unhealed spaces in me, needs that hadn't been fulfilled in my childhood, that kind of in my growing up and in the forming of my ego, uh, kind of created all kinds of shadows. And yeah, and I clearly struggled with that. Um, when I graduated, and maybe first before that even, um, so this crisis took place in, I did a master's in design, in product design, and this crisis happened after the third year, yeah, at the end in the holidays between the third and the fourth year. In total, that's 5 years. And whereas my older brothers, I'm the youngest of four boys, where my older brothers had left that incestuous nest very as soon as they could. I kind of left behind, uh, and their place, their rooms were rented out to African students who came to study in Antwerp, and that created a keen interest in Africa and in African culture, and the connection I felt with these well replaced brothers was more profound and learnful to me. Um, my impression at that time was that there was more value in those relationships than in the relationship with my parents. Um, When I graduated from design school, I immediately had a job in the industry. I actually wanted to already go to Africa, uh, but I was advised because I was still on a revalidation journey, not to do that and take a job in industry in Belgium. However, I wasn't happy. I joined Van Hol, which is a coaches company, buses and coaches. And I helped design a low instep bus for increased accessibility for people living with disabilities. And even if that was a nice job, um, I probably had way too much responsibilities without any experience. Um, so it was beyond my competencies. And I did that for 1 year, and then put kind of a final point around on engagement in the industry. I really didn't want to contribute to an industry that is exploitative, both of the environment and yeah, and also there were many question marks in me, and I fell back on my crush with art. And since I had been in psychiatry, there was, and luckily Belgium has this incredibly solid social security system where I could fall back on an invalidity bursary, which I did. And while doing that, well, first of all, I painted artistically. But while doing that, what I actually did is not fulfilling my true potential. Yeah? It was kind of a reactive mode. I don't wanna be involved in systems that are not perfect. Um, and it is at my second exhibition that my mentor and professor in sociology, psychology, and philosophy at the design school, and at that time also director of the design school, Mick Billet, he came to my vernissage of the second exhibition I did, and he bluntly told me, "Hey Bart, I don't think your career is in product design." Um, he was a big fan of Ivan Illich. And he also he was basically like a multi-entrepreneur also. He had also a program on Belgian TV with all kinds of social and environmental initiatives. And he encouraged me to have a lunch with him. And over that lunch, he really challenged me. He said, like, I don't think you're going to be a painter. And why would you throw away? I ended up front in my promotion, very good scores. And I said, well, you're such a talent. Why do you throw away your talent in real world problem? I graduated with a master's in appropriate technologies. And I took up the challenge. He said, like, think of a real world problem. What would you address? And at that time, there was Princess Diana, who largely advertised on basically on all channels in the world that there was a big need for novel landmine detection technologies, that landmines form a structural barrier to any development. And basically that I just responded to make like maybe the landmine problem. And then he encouraged me to, well, on one side, continue painting, because I think he really assessed that I needed that totally free creative path, which is also a healing path. And with some small scholarships he had available at the university, he sent me to all kinds of conferences and spent half of my time on making an analysis of that problem according design principles. And yeah, that's what I did. I didn't call myself a social entrepreneur at that time, or nobody had even labeled me a social entrepreneur. I was just still a punk. I actually think I still am kind of a rebel. But searching my way in life. Yeah. Yeah. To come back to your question of trust and like parallel to this, there was also Zen practice, where I had the luck to meet my teacher, Roland Rec, a French Zen master, and he basically he had experienced a similar thing with psychotropic substances. He had also used LSD when he was young, and for me, well, apart from the practice, but there was this deep connection on that level, where I felt like, wow, if this guy can bridge that gap between, on one side, you could say insanity, and on the other side, a thorough engagement with self, and we can come to that later, self, because it's an important one. Then I can learn from him. So I started gradually practicing more intensely, and well, there was still like 5 years between, or longer actually, yeah, or maybe some 5 years, yeah, I think, between that initial idea of working on the landmine problem and then receiving a first grant to start training rats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at these people who are successful with any kind of business or project. It always looks like, well, wow, their life was so straightforward, from here to there, and then exponential growth and so forth, or solving such a huge problem. But when you look into the details, it's always you realize they had to go through so many challenges and so many, maybe also lucky, a little bit of luck or specific incidents. Meeting certain people at the right time and so forth. Do you think, like, why did you become so successful? Was it more due to luck, or were you just very apt and right for that kind of task, or was it easier in those days to become a social entrepreneur and because I know people nowadays from the space, and I feel that there's a lot of people with good intentions, but most of the startups fail, and in the social entrepreneurship, maybe even more. I don't know. So why do you think you became so successful with your rats?
Well, it's been a long journey. Just to be clear on that, it has taken kind of 10 years of research and development with all kinds of obstacles. I think it's both luck and lots of effort. In Zen, we say if we walk the path also comes our way.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe that's maybe a bit abstract, but in Napoleon, the Napoleon Bonaparte, who I rarely refer to, he said, "My best generals are those who have most of luck."
Mm-hmm.
And so there is some truth in there. I think it's in embracing the opportunities. Being vigilant, spending big effort, obviously. It doesn't come without effort. Being open to be inspired, deeply connecting with people we can learn from. The trust that you mentioned earlier, and yeah, part also opportunism. Going for those opportunities. Specifically to this journey training rats, I think a big factor there was actually my unhappy childhood, where I felt very isolated in my childhood. I received a hamster at the age of 9 years old, yeah, and I could project my affection to that hamster. It became my best friend, and it is likely, therefore, that so many years later, when coming across an article by American scientists who had trained gerbils, like desert rats, to discriminate explosives, that I thought, like, of course, I'm going to train rats, my friends, the rats. And well, that was just the start of a vision. Because from there, it still took a long time before my proposals were credited and so on. Yeah.
Of course. But what I would like to clarify, the rats, so that you train the rats to find those landmines in the ground by using their smell, sense, their scent. And the rats, they die within the process? No, they just find the thing. No, to lay people, that's very unclear. How does this thing work? But in your talk, you have these videos of the people going around. So they have them in leashes, human people having the rats on leashes. So they just find the landmine, and then it's somehow cleared afterwards by technicians, or so the rat doesn't die. Yeah, okay.
No, the rat doesn't die at all. That's one of the main advantages. Main advantage of using the rats is that they are. I mean, there's many logistic advantages, and I mean, I can expand on that. But the main point really is that a rat can roam freely over suspected terrain without setting off the landmines because it's not heavy enough. Yeah, I don't think it would be matching with who I am to blow up the rats in the process.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Often in the past, when speaking about this, initially people have that thought, and it has everything to do with the bad reputation that rats have since the Middle Ages. Yeah.
And from there on, in your talk, you also talk about that you were projecting or trying around time about using rats for other purposes as well, better identifying tuberculosis in probes. So did what you started and what your organization is doing, that using rats for specific humanitarian causes, did that evolve further since you left the company?
Yes, it did. Well, I'm kind of a guy who runs 10 kilometers ahead of what the organization can execute. Yeah. So I had a vision for lots of detection tasks for the animals, and where I was able to work out together with my colleagues the landmine detection application and the tuberculosis application. I also had already a vision of finding people back under rubble with a camera backpack on the rat. That application, after many years of research, is now in operational testing in the south of Turkey, where there is a lot of structural collapse. And well, it will still take years of research and development before this can be fully operational. But there's also the detection part in terms of detection like in containers. At some point, the Wildlife Foundation in South Africa contacted us to eventually train rats to detect pangolin. Pangolin scales, which are pangolin is a species that's almost extinct. It's heavily poached and it's used for medicinal purpose in traditional Chinese medicine. And yeah, well, there is now clear evidence that the animals are capable of detecting these scales hidden in containers, and also tusks of elephants, so ivory. Also the horn of rhinoceros. And
So they can
also,
distinguish between a rhinoceros horn and a ivory and other scents.
if you would train them on that, they would.
It's incredible.
But it's not about the distinction. It's
Yeah,
about
okay.
determining
I
whether
see.
there's
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But that being said, you can train rats to detect certain levels of a particular scent and ignore other levels.
Incredible.
It's capabilities of the animals are amazing, really.
And based on that, like even just talking about it now, that from what you did, leading that organization and building it up, you would have had so many other options of expanding that work, like going into different directions with the rats or even starting something new. But then after 15 years or so working with that organization, you stepped down as the head and you became a Zen monk. And now you're fully dedicated to being a Zen monk and facilitator. So how did that decision come about from this very active life and, helping in the world with so many options and paths you could have gone, but instead becoming this Zen monk?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I became a Zen monk the
During
early year.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And kind of, I think my creativity has been opened more. And lateral thinking capabilities have been opened more because of this practice. Yeah. My commitment to be a Zen monk was in 2001, when after living 1 year in Tanzania, where I couldn't practice that first year, and I really had difficulties climatizing. I mean, adapting to the climate. Had all kinds of tropical diseases. Often had malaria, typhoid, amoeba. Lots of challenges for me to actually get adjusted to a tropical environment. Because of my Zen practice, I dreamt of a type of different leadership style than what was generally known like as a top-down pyramidal structure. And when you say you led that organization, I would like to reframe that and say we led that organization, because it's really a team's work, and I'm so grateful for the now I don't know how many, but big team that continues doing that humanitarian work. I see myself as, okay, I was the source of this, that took the initiative, and luckily that there was such a support from in first instance from my professors at Antwerp University, and then gradually more and more people believing in this idea. because indeed it was a long research and development journey where I have to say the Tanzanian trainers and the Mozambican trainers and Angolan trainers had a big input in making this sustainable technology. Just to put that in the right perspective. Where you say like that I decided from helping the world, let's say, to going a spiritual path. I actually don't see it like that. I think a genuine spiritual path needs to be rooted in service. And it's just a question of where do I put my priorities. After now, well, I think it's 37 years ago since I started sitting after that psychotic crisis in my life. And I think it's kind of because that maybe I had some kind of openness and connected dots that were not necessarily there also. So it's like two edges of a sword. Yeah.
I mean, you still consciously took the decision to more be available for your own inner development and for the inner development of others, rather than being an entrepreneur, right? Or rather than doing
Yes.
work in Africa, for example. And maybe I can also add from myself. After my school, I spent 1 year in Bangladesh as a volunteer working with poverty there and NGO, and we're still involved with that NGO as a family. We set up a small association here in Germany. We're supporting them. I'm guiding them a little bit remotely. But I also have this, now I have a family here in Germany, so it's a little bit hard to move to another country just like that. But I have this voice of maybe you should, go there. There's so much misery in these parts of the world. And here in Europe, we are living such easy lives. So even if I see the benefit of inner work for myself and others, and sometimes I'm doing these seminars for others and so forth, so I see the value of that, but still there's this voice saying, all these people, they are suffering, and that is real world suffering. So why should I not go there and do something there? Is it egoistic, for example, let's say, to stay in Europe and just do this nice well-being thing?
Well,
What do you say?
I don't think that is egoistic at all. There is, you could argue, and I actually do argue, that there's very little you can do in Bangladesh, for instance. Of course, you can go as a volunteer and work there, but the path is always under our feet. It's always where we are that we can do things. All the rest is kind of a mental projection, and doesn't really hands-on create something. I would also argue that the suffering in Bangladesh or in Somaliland or in war-torn areas is bigger than the suffering here. And okay, there's degrees of suffering, but suffering is suffering. And
that it isn't bigger, you mean? That the suffering
yes.
is the same? Mm.
If you suffer, you suffer. Yeah? And the liberating message, well, in this case from my tradition, is really that suffering and liberation are like the front and the back of one in the same hand. So it doesn't depend so much on the situation that we are in. It depends on how we look at it and how we approach it and how we deal with it. That being said, of course, in Europe with a working infrastructure, well, I don't know so much about the German trains, but but generally working infrastructure and with levels of materialism that actually are going to the other side, that basically create suffering because of so much material wealth. It's easy to argue actually that it is easier for us, and in many ways that is so. But a recent research from Leuven University shows that like uh, half of adults feel lonely. Um, and this is a big source of suffering, loneliness, isolation. Um, the yeah, so in a way, I think we are also a victim of the wealth and material welfare that we have created.
Yeah. Okay, so we have arrived at the second part of our conversation where we're diving into the path and meditation practice and what that means. And it's really, I have so many questions that I could ask you regarding this because I find it so interesting that you, being a person involved in the world, and still you're saying that, you know, right here where you are in Europe or just working on your inner things is as much as impact as you can have. Rather than going somewhere and doing some big project. So I try to understand that more and more, the statement of yours and where the statement is coming from. And so one thing I think would be valuable if you can explain from your side what you mean when you say you let's say Zen, the path of Zen Buddhism and Zen practice, and with the end goal of awakening, which for some people might be a little bit, strange, off, esoteric kind of a thing. But it's in some way it's very related to the Buddhist path and this idea of liberation, that we can become fully free, innerly free people, where we're not attached to anything in the world anymore. So there's no psychic, emotional suffering, maybe physical suffering or physical pain, but not emotional suffering anymore. So anyway, this end goal of awakening and this path of Buddhism, Zen Buddhism in your case, can you explain what it is for you and why you think it's so game changing or life changing, and can be such a difference to suffer less, wherever you are. So what is the essence of that?
Yeah, that's a big question. What is the essence of Zen? It's the likely the most commonly asked question in the history of Koan, and yeah, like what is the true essence of Buddhism?
But the real true essence, I want to know it now.
You want to know the real true essence?
Yeah.
Well, Joshu's answer to this was when there was a young monk coming to his monastery and wanting to explore and really wanting to learn what is the true essence. They had just finished their meal, and Joshua answered, you want to know the true essence? Have you finished your meal? And the monk said, yes. Well, go and wash your bowl. That was Joshu's answer. And there's many, many answers possible. Yeah, it's hard to explain. It's explaining Zen is kind of like explaining for a mute and deaf person to explain their dream. It's also so you cannot really express it in words, but you can experience it. And this is an experience that manifests itself in a life of service, which comes back to your very first question, really, like I choose to lead an inner path. It doesn't mean that I'm kind of only focused on myself. That is a complete misunderstanding. In the vision of the Buddha, true self is no self. So basically, we only exist in relation to the world. And that is a wonderful thing, because if we work on ourselves through our own effort, through our own diligence, through our own meditation, through a life of service, we basically create a better world. a world of more harmony, love, and care. And being a witness of care that was given to me, and the support I've received from so many sides, I think it's just normal to have this reciprocity and serve the world. Yeah, it's a really important thing. The effort done, and this really relates to the paramitas, basically, the paramitas or perfections, the so-called, you're probably familiar with those. In Mahayana Buddhism, they're slightly different from Theravada Buddhism. Zen belongs to the Mahayana traditions. But yeah, the so-called perfections are immediate ways to find liberation. And the first one of them is to give, fuse in Japanese, to give not only material goods, but to give our effort, to give our time, to give our energy. The second one, and they're all interconnected. There's these, maybe I sum them up, the C's paramitas or C's perfections. And if you practice one of them, you basically practice all of the others. The second one is morality, or moral discipline. Not to kill, not to steal, not to lie. Because by doing that, we actually go against that liberating aspect and we create suffering rather than alleviating suffering. The third one is tolerance, patience. Then effort or energy, which is a really important one. And that is for Westerners often, I mean, we live in a kind of comfortable luxury, and I think that's what you refer to, like, okay, aren't we looking too much for comfort and ease in this materialistic world? I agree. It is not really helpful, and therefore only using what we need, a life of simplicity, is really important. And this is really, really important. For instance, our clothes, our robes, the kesa, we actually sewed these by hand in a very concentrated way. It's also leading to a life of simplicity and service. So we have Fusi are giving morality, patience or tolerance, effort or energy, and then practice of meditation, being fully attentive in what we do, going to the end of our actions, complete our actions. Very often, at least I can recognize for myself, if I'm not very attentive, I kind of leave loose spaces behind and sometimes create more confusion than clarity. And then the sixth paramita is wisdom or prajna. Wisdom which is kind of going hand in hand with compassion. Without compassion, no wisdom. Without wisdom, no compassion.
Yeah, yeah. And how would you explain this to like a lay person who is not into any Buddhist or practice things? And so maybe most people nowadays have heard about mindfulness of that, and there's all these studies about mindfulness. Like if you train to be mindful, your stress level reduces, your brain interconnections change, and so forth. So that is documented. But beyond just a little bit of mindfulness, let's say, what is the transformative power of doing this path on a long run, like all over the years? This practice that you explained contains meditation, but it's not just meditation. It's also about how you go about your life, how you live your life, how you relate to others, to the world. So this, what is the difference of this practice compared to just mindfulness? Or could also say about doing therapy, for example, or other useful practices.
I think they're all needed. Zen is a non-dogmatic practice for all clarity. So no matter what we even speak about it, They're just like fingers watching the moon, fingers pointing at the moon. It's not the moon. It's not a direct experience. And therefore, basically the practice and realization are not different. They're one and the same thing. I'm going to say that again because it's kind of too difficult for the ego to understand. The ego always wants a goal. We want to reach something. And with mindfulness, which is, by the way, is a kind of a secular deviation or extraction from what Zen Buddhism teaches us, and it's often very directed to a specific goal of reducing our stress, to improve our cognitive capacities, and to reduce pain. Originally, John Kabat-Zinn developed this in his pain clinic to support patients in reducing pain. And we can have all kinds of goals of self-improvement. Yeah? But as long as we have a specific goal, we may reach that goal, but in a way it's going to be very limited. For our practice to become really universal, we need to make it, as we call it, mushotoku, without any goal of gaining something personally. In other words, when we practice, let's practice universally. And it is this message of the Buddha and the practice of the Buddha is so simple that the ego cannot understand this. Basically, he said, sit down, focus on your posture, have a graceful posture, concentrate on your breathing, stay tuned with the breathing rhythm, and these two elements of being absorbed in embodied awareness and tuning into the rhythm of the breathing realign us with the reality of the present moment. Our body is always here, our breathing is always now. And reality, the Buddha taught, Dharma means reality. That's what the Buddha taught, yeah. Reality can be directly accessed through embodied awareness and breath. And what we can do, and what happens then, that is the interesting thing, is that our mind starts functioning differently. Instead of getting entangled in our thoughts, in our projections, in our emotions, in all kinds of mental processes, our mind starts functioning like a mirror that reflects reality as it is, without opposing any image or without pursuing any image. By simply constantly coming back to that simple living reality of the present moment in embodied awareness and breathing. That's basically the whole Buddhist doctrine in a nutshell.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, I think I know what you mean. Sometimes when I have my practice and I sit down, and sometimes it's very chaotic, but sometimes the mind settles and it's peaceful, and then it's just there's no thoughts, then there's no expectations, and it's just and space. And then I get up and still something with my family or with a job, and then I can get entangled very quickly again, right? There's this
yeah,
peace,
of course.
but then still there's success and misfortune and things that I want and don't want, and good things and bad things, and what should I do with my life? So I know that what you're describing, but then it also switches back very quickly to a life of suffering in the end. Right?
Yeah. Okay. But okay. So, and
I had,
here is where, sorry.
I had the idea that in Zen, I also have this thing about satoris and, certain moments of opening, and then something disruptive, like in entrepreneurship, you also talk about disruption, something disruptive where something happens to you and then life is different and better some way, easier, more connected. Isn't that the thing?
Well, Satori, there's a lot of confusion about this. Satori actually means insight. You developed an insight. Okay. And that, as such, is not yet realization. realization is about the non-attachment, neither to the phenomena or the phenomenal world of what happens with the family, job, all these pieces where we identify with and that we also need in daily life. Neither to that nor to the absence of those. You could say vacuity. The deepest truth, and then it's really that vacuity and the phenomena are not different. It's the essence of the Heart Sutra that allows us to reach the other shore, or better said, to this liberating aspect is in the non-attachment. If we are completely attached to phenomena in the world, we can see where it leads to. But also being attached to vacuity, emptiness, often translated as emptiness. It's basically it's an odd translation because it is nothing to do with a vacuum, or it is everything to do with interdependence and impermanence. But also being attached to that is only one facet of reality. The detached mind is the mind that freely flows between those. And we can observe that mind, actually, if we sit a bit more intensely. You can see indeed at some point there is no thinking left, especially when the breathing out completely until the gravity point reaches the lower belly, the hara. Then it is as if there are no thoughts left. Body and mind dropped away. But life is life. We cannot stay there. Yeah, try to not breathe for a moment. I don't think we'll sustain long. So with the in-breath, a new thought comes up. In Japanese, hishiryo is thinking. Fu-shiryo is absence of thinking. Now, to learn to think with the entire body and to really embrace reality in an harmonious way, we need to go beyond this duality of thinking and not thinking. That is the Hishiryo mind. It's a mind that is not attached to anything, that freely flows between emptiness and the phenomena. And because of this capability of not being attached to it, it's a free mind, it's a liberated mind, it's a mind that doesn't get stuck on anything, a fluid mind that is happy in nature.
But it seems very far away.
No, it's right here, right now, accessible at any moment. If we go beyond the ego. The ego always identifies with something. This is my pain. And we kind of dramatize all of that. Or I miss this thing. Oh, beautiful car. Oh, I want this car. Well, until we have it, and then there is through hedonistic adaptation, we are very quickly dissatisfied with our earlier satisfaction, and we kind of need a stronger impulse. It's moving away from that conditioning of our mind. It's coming free of these conditionings. Maybe I pause it there because I'm speaking a lot.
So would you say liberation or awakening, or how you want to call it, is the goal of your path?
No, I would say the path is the goal of the path. The path itself. And liberation is a consequence. If we do the right action, which the right effort, right? You know, the Eightfold path, right? Interestingly, it starts with the right vision. Yeah? There's three elements in there. There's wisdom, there is morality, and there is meditation. The wisdom expresses in the first two aspects of that path is the right vision and the right intention, or the more cognitive part of wisdom and the more volitional part of wisdom. Then the following three are the right speech, the right action, and the right livelihood.
Morality.
And say again?
Morality.
It's
Part ethics.
morality,
Yeah.
indeed, or ethics. We like to speak about ethics. I mean, we can put a whole separate chapter, but in essence, at the foundation of ethics is morality, indeed. And yeah, so with right livelihood, Buddha means a life of service, being. Well, there's only few kind of livelihoods that he excluded, and knowing that the Buddha lived 2,500 years ago. One of them was hunting, killing animals. The other one was forging, like metal works, and I don't know why that he I think it has to do with the extraction of things in the soil and transforming that into metal, and maybe with warfare, which is obviously needs metallurgy. So far for morality, and then the third aspect in this eightfold path is practice, coming with the right effort, the right concentration, where Zen practice puts the emphasis on, and the right observation. Now, it's interesting that it starts with vision, yeah, because it is the meditation part that actually leads to the right vision. Hence, the Eightfold Path is traditionally depicted as a wheel with 8 spokes.
Yeah.
And basically you can use any of these entry points as a entry point to the path.
So, okay, so you are saying that this liberation or enlightenment or whatever is not, for you, it's not the goal. It's the path itself is the goal, the practice every day, the being right here, right now. And it's interesting to listen to different teachers or masters having different, talking about this differently. And obviously there's, it's what we're doing here is all in words. So whatever is, this is beyond words. So obviously it's not describable. And it's also kind of makes sense that even masters talk about this very differently, because it's, as you're saying, it's just pointing to a moon, and one points, this person points this way and the other that way. But I in another interview with another Zen master from the US that I liked the interview very much, he was saying, they talked about enlightenment very specifically, and his answer was about what enlightenment is. To him, the best description is to be a trustworthy friend, in the sense of being a trustworthy friend to yourself, but then also to the people around you and to even other beings. And
I think that's a great answer as well.
I like that idea very much. And that, I mean, that brings me to another question that I wanted to ask you is, how do you think that this, whatever you call it, whether it's a final goal of a path or it's the path itself, the practice of, as we said, of meditation, of certain ethics, living in a certain way, practicing a certain way also in your everyday life, how this can help to solve the current crises we're in. So we have all these crises today, climate crisis, which I'm focused a lot on, where we don't know whether we'll be able to live as a human race in few decades from now. Other crises where we hit planetary boundaries. Now we have also geopolitics, wars, and so forth. And there's so many people trying to solve these problems on different levels. But it also feels very helpless. For example, climate crisis, if I go there for a moment, I've been working on solar power for 15 years or so. I've been engaged in activism the last 3 years. And if you look at the curves, the CO2 emissions per year have gone up every time, despite all the COPs, the conference of the parties, UN processes, despite politicians trying to do the right thing, activists, technological innovators, and still we are on this path to extinction. And the question is then, well, what do we do? Like, how can we solve this? And so would you say that this, what we are discussing here, having a inner freedom, having a free mind that is able to suffer less, is able to support others well, attend to the needs of the world, can that help in this kind of crisis? Or is it maybe even crucial that is the thing, that is what we're lacking at the moment?
Absolutely. The second
Yeah.
part, it is crucial. And yeah, and there's more. Myself, I'm not fearful. I'm very hopeful because I see all around me a growing number of people searching and yeah, searching a path of inner transformation in whatever shape that comes. Yeah. So let's not get stuck in schools and disciplines and various modalities. It's about leading an authentic life, a life true to oneself.
Mm-hmm. And
And
you feel that is growing around you. You see more people.
absolutely,
Mm.
yes, yes. Uh, yeah, there. So the problem with fear is that it immobilizes us. It takes away our agency.
Yes.
And we get stuck in a kind of thinking like, oh, look at all these threats coming at us. And yes, there are these threats. I don't ignore them. We have a majority of the planetary boundaries are now already transgressed. Yeah? Reason the more to go to the root causes why this is. Yeah. And the root causes of these are the so-called poisons in the first place, ignorance, but that manifests itself in greed and in hatred. Like in, I don't know if you know the Wheel of Life, this the Buddhist cosmologic map, basically, which is a map of reality.
Mm.
It's very often expressed in tankas. The Tibetan schools have a lot of those. It's like a circle, and then with like a mythological bird that decides with skulls that decides on life and death. At the very center of this, there are these three poisons. The three poisons that create basically suffering, and we all carry those seeds in us.
It being greed, hatred, and ignorance, right?
Yes. And at the root of these three, there is really ignorance.
Mm.
It's because of our ignorance that we are greedy and ignorant because we don't really understand the true nature of our existence and therefore constantly search for compensation for our unhealed spaces where we are not conscious. They make it that we become angry to things that life becomes unacceptable and stimulates our greed as if we and our desire as if we continuously look for praise, for pleasure, for gains, um, yeah, or the opposite. Yeah, our fears of getting blame or pain or losing that also eats us, and therefore we create kind of egocentric situation where we think we can kind of control reality, while what is missing there is surrender. Surrender to a path that is beyond attachment and aversion. And that surrender, we can find it in inner transformation through meditation, through inner work of all kinds and modalities, healing work, where we can, and really at the core there is embracing our interdependence with all that exists.
Mm.
We have no grip on what some dictatorial leaders are actually doing in the world right now. But also that is an illusion, because even if we cannot change that directly, we can change ourselves. And because we are entirely part of the universe, if we change, the whole universe changes a bit. By the way, this the Club of Rome, who has all these reports on climate change and so on,
Exactly.
and on sustainability, they're quite clear on this. Even if we put more resources, even if we work faster towards sustainable development goals, and even if we create more collaborations, it all doesn't work. The only way we can go is through a path of inner transformation. And then we can solve this mess that we created. Honestly, this is in the dualistic world, yeah, the world of phenomena. And so where, like I said, liberation and suffering are like two sides of one hand, one could argue the mess that we have created is not yet deep enough for us to really understand that, oh, we need to walk this path together.
Yeah.
So I remain hopeful. And the last thing is, of course, I'm mourning over environmental loss and all kinds of disasters occurring because of climate change. Of course, it is very painful, and yes, but if it puts us in a place of fear, we lose our agency.
Yeah. Do you know Vanessa Andreotti and the book Hospicing Modernity?
No,
No? Basically,
please tell me.
yeah, basically she and her colleagues, she's from Brazil and working with indigenous tribes there and on this thing about the crises and how to deal with them and learning a lot from the indigenous people. And she's also working within a collective, and she wrote this book, Hospicing Modernity. And basically what she's saying, my summary is that all these crises, there's no chance we manage them. It'll all break down. And in a way, it's important that everything breaks down. I think she's not specific on whether that will be the extinction of human race or whether it'll just
I hope
be,
she doesn't.
yeah, or whether it's just lots of suffering and people dying and civilization breaking down, but still something will go on. But her main point is that the systems we created, like the current economic system, political system, everything that will all break down. And she says that ends the book, Hospicing Modernity. The best we can do at this point is to accompany this process so that we may learn well from it and then create hopefully something better. But we cannot rush the process. We cannot have a master plan for it. We have to be alert and available and just assist this process to then at some point create something else. And I think that's what I heard a little bit from you right now, that there needs to be this, the suffering needs in the world and within ourselves needs to be maybe even bigger, probably even bigger, so that we can be touched so deeply that we are really ready to try something new. And then hopefully something new can emerge. We're not doomed as human beings to live in this mess and this chaos and destructive world that we created. We can do better, but for that we need to first hit rock bottom, if it were. Is that also what you're saying, or?
Yeah, that's also what you hear me say, indeed. I'm on one point, I would reframe it kind of like when you say the suffering in us needs to even deepen. I don't think so. And I think there is the potential by becoming more aware and through any spiritual practice. And what is spirituality? I define spirituality as the capability. It's a competency. I call it a leadership competency. Is the capability to open up, to be inspired, to allow ourselves to embrace our vulnerable human condition, embrace it to the fullest, to allow us to be inspired by others, and because of that capability, also inspire others. So how that connects with inner suffering, and with inner we often think like inner means inside the individual, right? But an individual, by definition, is a non-divisible. It's an individual is unity, is oneness. Yeah? Um, and talking about society and societal phenomena, which all these how we live as a humanity on the planet is clearly a societal phenomenon. Um, the resolve there um, not only lies in our personal work, well, it also lies in how we co-create and how we embrace the thinking of a collective. I think the Brazilian author you referred to, I heard you somewhere say the aspect of collective, which is a really important one. Um, Having lived myself for 12 years in Tanzania, I have experienced, and we were very embedded and integrated in society there. It was a wonderful time. I learned so much there about how a collective resonance can work, and how so we as Westerners, and this is, like really plays against us, our Cartesian existential mode of functioning. My reason of existence, or I should say existential mode rather than mode of functioning. Our reason of existence is that fact that I can think. That's so that leads to us Westerners often being in the mental space, while in these original cultures, where I can't, like, most of the African continent also too, in a wide diversity of various cultures, but they all have this Ubuntu, or the collective, in common. So the existential paradigm there is not the capacity of the individual to reason, but is the belonging of the individual to the collective. My reason of existence is because we as a group exist. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I love that. I have in our seminars that we're doing regarding treating emotional aspects of the climate crisis. I also have the feeling that this being together is a lot of the process, that just coming together and being transparent and authentic and sharing our emotions in a trustworthy way. That is so much of the work. And there's this person called Daniel Schmachtenberger who also emphasizes that the evolution has always selected for humans not as individual persons, which we are sometimes emphasizing in Hollywood movies or in the business world, but always as collectives. We, as you're saying, in the savannah of Africa, we wouldn't survive without the others. And in our modern Western world, we have become used to being independent, being, have your social security and your money, so I can be as independent as possible. But it's not where we came from. It's not what we are, and that, I think, also leads to a lot of suffering and having difficulties to deal with what we have to do right now. I want to be mindful of your time also and slowly come to an end. But I would really like to talk a little bit, concluding, about this personal level of all this. So if there's, among the listeners, there might well be people who are activists or who are working on international organizations on, these big crises that we've been discussing, or other people just thinking of what can I do and how to deal with these crises. And sometimes we're overwhelmed with there's so much suffering and I cannot do anything. And sometimes we're fearful and we don't know what to do, where to start. Do you have specific recommendations what to do or where to start when you're in this position where you feel like, oh, this is too much. I just can't handle it.
Yeah. And I see in many very well-meaning people that this fear and this leads to desperation. Yeah,
Mm.
and and um, and I understand the mechanism. However, we cannot afford ourselves to be desperate. We need to stay hopeful. It's a moral imperative. Um, and also a lot depends on the sources of information that we have. Yeah? For instance, and like the newspapers and all the media are full of like the bad news.
Mm.
But in the alley where I live, the neighbor that supports another neighbor by uh, helping her with putting the dustbins outside. There's a very small, simple example.
Mm.
Um, we insufficiently see those seeds of well-being for a global society. Um, Also in the statistics, if you look at, for instance, one statistic is that there have never been, despite all the wars that are going on right now, there have never been in history so few people dying in armed conflicts.
Mm.
Life expectancy has never been so high. Um, child mortality has never been so low. So it's not a black and white situation where there is only threats. There is also promise, and yeah, how can I say this? Um, the risk is that we only look at what is not going and stay stuck in a kind of old school paradigm where we see the threats of the crisis, but don't see the opportunity. I think, in Chinese, crisis is two characters. One is threat and the other is opportunity. And we only generally have the tendency, and that is a kind of normal also because our nervous system is wired for threats through evolution. Yeah. Um, it takes, a neuroscientist told me once, it takes like 8 milliseconds for a negative emotional stimulus to trigger our sympathetic nervous system, while it takes half a second for a positive emotional stimulus to activate our parasympathetic system, which is that of love, compassion, hope, and all that. So what you hear me say, and then I'm stopping talking, what you hear me say is we need to emphasize on the positive because we are wired for the negative.
Yeah.
So we need to develop that positive capacity of openness, care, and that happens through the simple reality of breathing out.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to add that when you say focus on the positive, as I understand, it's not just positive thinking, which is also a method that one can
No.
practice, but this more embodied noticing all the good things going on at this moment. That my breath is still working, my heart is still beating, I hear the birds outside. I'm still living, and I'm interacting with other people who are also vulnerable human beings, and oftentimes they're kind to me and I'm kind to them. So embodying and feeling this goodness, and I think that's really a good and important thing to focus more our attention on that. Still, I also think the big crisis that we are in, the planetary boundaries, it's not a black and white thing, but they are real threats to how we live. And I mean, they're affecting so many people in the south already. There are people specifically in Tanzania, where you were, and Bangladesh, who in the next decades will lose their homes because it will be simply too hot to live there, and fights over water and all these things. So the trajectory that we're on is really worrying. And to me, the Koan, if you will, is how can I be in touch with those issues because I want to be in touch with them. I feel like if I just
Hmm.
withdraw from that, it's somehow I create a blind spot
Sure,
that I don't
of
want. I
course.
want to be available for it, but at
Hmm.
the same time, not then losing myself in pity or suffering or
Hmm.
fear. It's a kind of koan as well. How to be available,
Hmm.
but also be well somehow. To see the
Hmm.
suffering and at the same time be happy. Well, is it possible? I don't know.
I think it's a great koan, and it's the actual koan of our time, like how to get out of this mess.
Mm.
Yeah, without losing ourselves. Yeah, and without becoming egotistic. Uh, so yeah, it's a great koan, and also there the two sides of reality. On one side, there is all this suffering. Um, Closing ourselves off of that part of reality to be only in wellness, peace, and joy, that is not realistic either. It's kind of egotistic, looking for our pleasure. Um, Pleasure is a consequence of good action. When can we be joyful? If the cause of the joy is a good action, automatically we become joyful. True joy is in serving.
Mm.
Yeah, and serving a larger purpose, planting a tree. How joyful is that? And seeing that tree grow. Um, and when we need kind of a lot more positive actions to compensate for the negative that we create. Yeah.
And
Because it
what?
is in our human nature, and I think there we distinguish ourselves from animals. We have both this very destructive,
Mm.
egotistic tendency, and we also have the capability to overcome. And it's really kind of just switching the coin one to the other. It's as simple as that.
Mm.
But the solution, yeah, as I said, the solution of the Buddha is too simple for the ego to understand.
Mm.
You have to go beyond and surrender. Yeah.
And where would you start if there's a person listening now and they say, okay, uh, on this inner path, supporting myself and the inner well-being, and then also on the outer path of creating some positive impact on the world. Where would you start on each of those?
Both together. Um, it's not for nothing that the three treasures in Buddhism is Buddha, the fact of enlightenment, you could say, awakening, liberation, redemption, all those things. Um, the second one is Dharma, reality, also the teachings. And I include all the teachings there, not only Buddhist teachings, but all the wisdom that has over so many generations been accumulated. And Buddhist wisdom is one of them. And then the third treasure is Sangha, is the community of like-minded people who are genuinely searching for a world of more care and harmony. So deeply connecting through one's own practice, deeply connecting with others is also what we need. Yeah, it is at least in Mahayana Buddhism the path of the Arahat who realizes enlightenment or awakening by oneself and alone. Um, is considered as well not the it is needed in some parts to really be intentionally focused and go your own path, but the resolve is in community. If we throw away the aspect of community, of the collective, um, then yeah, we simply go throw away a big part of who we are, yeah? Because we only exist through collective.
Mm.
Already, we are the result of the love between two people, yeah, not of one person alone. Um, and yeah, and we get shaped through collective. Hence, also an incredibly big like moral imperative to tap into collective wisdom and to connect with others. Nobody can do it by themselves.
Mm. And how do you then start specifically if you this thing about if you want to contribute in the world, where, like you have been a social entrepreneur, now you're guiding others in these other things. Where do you, if you're just confused about should I do this or that, or it's so hard because all these crises are so complex and I want to contribute, but then it's so hard to decide where to start and what to do.
Yeah, and that is counterintuitive because we think what we need to do is in the outside world. We need to be active. Well, Zen is not that active. It starts from the inside, in the sense that it starts with your own commitment to practice. And honestly, everything seems to be more important or interesting than that. There's so much distraction in the world, and there's like lots of things that pull us away from choosing, to lavish at the source. And the source is really there, is in the simple living reality of our being and our being to its fullest potential. And coming back to the same thing, embodied awareness, breathing, and observe what is going on. And of course, I mean, then that's where we start, right? I mean, that's any change, kind of any meaningful change, needs to come from that source. And when we practice, we kind of start seeing all of these mechanisms in us that come from unhealed spaces and that are not so nice. We really come to terms with our egoism, uh, and that is the place where we can find support. So I think the inner work is one thing, and the meditation is the other thing, and they complement. They kind of need to go together. And this may be abstract. I'll speak from my own. It's only when, of course, I started practicing as kind of a therapeutic approach, but the practice itself is not therapeutic. The practice itself opens us, goes beyond that little categorization of our little ego. Yeah? And it is in meaningful conversations in combination with spiritual practice that I found kind of resolve and that healing could occur. I mean, it's both. Also in the practice, there's healing by itself in a natural way. And but there are lots of modalities available now, and especially for people who feel isolated in their practice. It's very meaningful to connect with others, to have profound conversations from that vulnerable condition that is our humanity. So becoming truly human.
Well, thank you very much, Bart, for your time. It was such a delightful conversation to have with you. It was really inspiring, and on one side what you say, but also how you say it or what you represent. I don't know. It was really great conversation with you, and I'm very thankful for this. People, I think, can find you on your website, and you're giving this directly accessible online meditation guided sessions once a week, I think, so people can check that out if they want. And I think you also give courses and workshops which people can find. And is there any last thing that you would like to say, or maybe a silence that you want to guide us in before we finish this?
We can do that. Can do a moment of stillness. But I'm actually kind of curious also to what is your main bring along from this conversation. Mm-hmm. I deliberately don't use take away, but what is your bring along? Like, what will you bring along beyond this conversation? And I ask that as much to you as to the audience who may be, I guess there will be some folks listening to this, right? What is your real bring along?
Yeah, for me, I think what is present now is this feeling of what you emphasized over and again about being here in this moment and not trying to find a solution out there or finding I have to do such and such to solve such and such, but being here and being able to settle into this moment without doubts and questions and all, but just here, this breath, this conversation, this person, and kind of trust that from there other things will emerge that will also have impacts in the outside, hopefully. But yeah, this, I don't know, this encouragement and felt sense that I perceive from you of being here and yeah, trust that something will emerge from this. That's what's most present for me at the moment.
Thank you. It's brilliant. If I succeeded in inspiring in this way, I think that it was really worth having this conversation. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and maybe one last word on the magic of breathing, really. Master Dogen, the founder of the Soto school, which is the kind of largest Zen school in existence currently, and which kind of spread all over the world, he said in about breathing in his Shobogenzo, his masterpiece of like a very extended record. He says the real magic, the real miracle is in the simplicity of breath. In the morning, we practice so many, I think 800 breaths. In the evening, we practice 3,000 breaths. I'm not sure about the numbers, if I'm quoting that correctly. But it's really in the magic of what happens in the present moment. In this incredible life-giving breath. That's where the magic is. In that it's so simple that we cannot imagine it. So, with that, maybe we conclude with just a moment of stillness. Mm-hmm. So I invite us to take on a graceful posture. That is really important. And the key to the posture is really the tilting of the pelvis forward, so that the diaphragm can relax and the breathing can descend into the hara. It's important to go to the end of our actions, so also to the end of our out-breath, until there's no air left, before taking on a new in-breath. And with every out-breath, we can let go of unnecessary tensions. Especially tensions accumulating in the face, in the shoulders, in the chest, and in the belly. And in a graceful posture, the back is strong and straight. The front, soft and flexible. So while we take refuge in this moment of stillness, let's continue exploring balance in these two opposites, strength and softness, tension and relaxation, finding support in the gravity of the weight of our body in this horizontal surface of the planet that carries us throughout our lives. and putting our energy in the verticality, our potential for personal growth. Simply by slightly pushing the top of our head upward while standing solidly with our feet in the fertile humus.
Well, thank you very, very much, Bart, for your time and your sharing.
Thanks for having me.
I hope this conversation will be of use for many others as well.
That's my hope too.
All the best for your endeavors and
Well,
hope to see you soon.
you too. May you be safe and well and thrive. And yeah, and the same to your audience. Have a wonderful continuation. Bye for now.